Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. My guest today is Ayisi Makatiani, one of the pioneers of the internet in Kenya and Africa, and somebody that I've known personally for probably over 30 years. Ayisi has been on the very cutting edge of technology for at least the last 30 years, and today is actually at the forefront of looking at the convergence of AI and technology in Kenya and the rest of Africa. Karibu sana, Ayisi.
Thank you very much, Moses.
Yeah.
It's been good knowing you for that long and working together in this space.
And thank you for joining us, because I think I've been wanting to do this podcast with you for a long time. I think the opportunity presented itself today, and of course, with the seminar you have next week. And I really wanted to just sort of use this opportunity to sort of unpack Ayisi, to talk about who you are, where you're coming from, origin story, so to speak, and how this all connects the dots to where we are today at this AI moment. So, Ayisi, I want to go back to the early days, Maseno, growing up in Western Kenya. Who's Ayisi, family, background? I want to sort of build that story from that beginning point and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So grew up in Mumias from Kakamega. Had a teacher earlier on who made me passionate about science. I can recall exactly at the moment when he convinced me when I was still in primary school that science was the best thing, and I got into it.
Okay.
Managed to get into Maseno, which was the biggest school you could get into in Western Kenya. From there, did Alliance for A-levels. And at Alliance, I decided that I wanted to be an electrical engineer, because if you were good at Alliance, you did electrical engineering. That was default.
That was what everyone wanted to do.
That was default. It was not because of any big thinking or anything like that. So and then one day I was in the library, and I see in the library that the best engineering school in the world was MIT, and I said maybe I should try MIT. So I apply, and luckily I got in.
Now let's be very clear here. MIT is not an easy place to get into,
no,
right?
It's not.
So how did you do this? Was it just the incredible grades, or?
I think from a very early stage, when I was in Maseno, I was so determined to get into Alliance. That was my singular focus.
Wow.
Because I had applied to go to Alliance when I was in primary school, and somehow the teachers didn't think I could get in, so they had switched it and put Maseno instead.
No way.
Yeah, and
wow.
I ended up doing very well, but didn't get in.
Okay.
And so when I got into Maseno, I think I made a singular determination that I was actually going to get into Alliance. And yes, eventually I did. And then when I was there, because of the momentum, you're doing all the right subjects, you're doing the hardest subjects you can get in the school.
Yes.
MIT, when you apply to MIT, I do interviews for MIT. They want to see that you've done the hardest subjects you could do.
And the rigor, yeah?
Yeah. And then they say, okay, maybe this guy can do it here. So by the time I was applying, I had done maybe the hardest science subjects you could do at Alliance at that stage. And yes, that meant when I applied, I did. I mean, I took courses like basic programming when you're the only person doing the exam.
Wow.
And there was no teacher for basic programming. So by the time you've done that, they see a guy who's done basic programming in A-level exams.
Wow.
They say, okay, fine, maybe he wants to.
So it was rare those days, huh?
There was no one teaching it, so it didn't exist. There were no computers. The only computers exist in Kenya were, in very big corporations, NCR, the big, mainframe computers.
Yeah.
No one else had. There was no PCs then.
Wow.
PCs came after.
Wow. So let me get this straight. So you finish at Alliance, and now you get on a plane, you go to MIT. What was that like, that transition from Kenya to the US?
I think for me, the day I got admitted, I was at that stage. I had actually started doing accountancy at, we used to have a year between
that period. Yes.
Yeah, so I started doing accounting at Strathmore.
Wow.
And I had just, I think, done the first set of exams, and I got an admission to MIT. I knew my life would change.
Wow.
So I don't think I ever showed up at Strathmore again.
This was it. You're done.
Yeah. So it was clear at that stage that would change my life. I was already a very driven person at that stage. And I also knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur from the very early stages. And I believe that MIT would put me on a trajectory where I could use entrepreneurship in a way that I could do more, because entrepreneurs at that stage were respected, not as much in Kenya.
But in that market,
in that market, engineering entrepreneurs were respected. In Kenya, probably less so. Engineers, you got a title of an engineer, and then you probably, if you really wanted to do big things, you went to the university to teach. So got into MIT, spent my 4 years there studying hard, also participating in sports at the very highest level in the US.
These are collegiate sports.
Yeah, collegiate sports, NCAA track and field.
Okay.
Yeah, where again I was a champion in a couple of events, national champion.
What?
The NCAA 400 meters.
No way.
Yeah, and the 4x4. So we do have a couple of, still have about a few records from MIT.
Okay.
So between that, joining frats, and being part of the whole engineering software ecosystem, I had a very busy 4 years in Boston studying.
So I'm curious. So at this point, do you graduate? Do you take a job? What happens? Because I'm really keen to understand kind of the genesis of the Africa Online moment, because obviously that's where I worked, and I worked under you and other many great leaders there. But more importantly, I'd like to understand where this started to happen, possibly the moment the internet became a thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit of how this all came together, and maybe also the founding team and all that?
Yeah. So I think, and that's a good one, a good question, partly because now, as we look at AI, we are now, a lot of us are reflecting with what we saw with internet at that stage. The thing is, at MIT and a few campuses at that stage, you already had an internet on campus. So we used to communicate via internet, and we knew what it could do. We already understood, because we could communicate via internet, we could send papers, you could access documents, you could work from the dorm, you could work from a lab. You know, we already understood what people now, do for granted today, and they couldn't do then. We understood that it would change the world once it became accessible. So I graduated in a very similar time to now, when you have when there's a recession going on.
Okay.
And at that stage, I took a job on campus at the media laboratory at MIT, basically running the whole of their network, the internet network. And at that stage, I realized I could now run what we were calling the Kenya Net, which is basically a network of Kenyans who wanted to organize parties on the weekends. I could run it, off of the network, and I had access to the networking aspects of it. We managed to get it to work, but we put it on a computer outside, and I had a friend of mine, a colleague who had gone to school together at MIT, Karanja Gakio, and we put the machine at his house. So he was running it from his house. And so did that for about a year, discovered that we could now log into machines in Nairobi with modems, get news, and distribute it on this network of, by then, about 500 people across various universities in the US, and managed to get Amolong Weno to join us. Amolo's father, who had also been in the newsprint, allowed us to have a computer at his office, got a secretary to type in the headlines for the day. We would upload it at 3 a.m. and distribute it. And then we told people, this costs money, please donate. And people would send checks. And at some stage, we were making more money from donations, people just sending checks from us, than we needed, and we knew what to do with. And it wasn't a serious business. So at that stage, we said, maybe there's something here.
Okay.
Maybe let's actually formalize it, start improving the quality of the news we're collecting, get more people on the network, and build a website. So that's now where we start thinking maybe we can do this a lot more seriously. we saw what America Online was doing. I said, aha, we can do what America Online is doing. So let's form a company. And we formed a company called Africa Online and basically copied everything that America Online was doing and collected information. Eventually, I came and sat with Nation Media Group. We negotiated. They allowed us into their mainframe. We would dial into their mainframe straight from.
Wow.
I don't think they understood the risk they were taking, but we could log in from Boston into the mainframe, upload the information and the news and share it. Of course, after about 3-4 months, there was a risk, and they allowed us to access it through a firewall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's more of a content business,
Yes.
right? You're more distributing, collecting, aggregating, and we're not yet in the connectivity side of things.
No.
So there's obviously a key moment there as well, because I remember vaguely, probably was it 95, 94, somewhere there. That's when the email service came to Kenya, right?
So the reason we got a lot of press was that, so we had universities. Universities were logging on, embassies, but the embassy, American embassy staff here were logging on because we're also sending news from the other side in real time. And they would log into this machine. But also, our embassy staff in Canada, in London, Kenyan embassy in Washington, and the consulate in LA were also subscribing to our news. Koigi Wamwere was arrested. It became big news. Koigi went to Cornell University. Cornell have a lot of journalists, and one of the journalists at the Boston Globe, was following the Koigi Wamwere story, and we were the ones feeding them the story 2-3 times a day.
You were the source.
You were the source. So he wanted to come and see, what is this thing that can now get news from Nairobi 3 times a day, and it's cheap. It's like, $20 a month. So he came and did an interview on us, and one of these multimillionaires in the Boston area who invented voicemail saw it. Young guy, 33-year-old guy saw it and called us up and says, "I like what you guys are doing. Can I invest in it?" So yeah, please do. So he invested in us to expand it across the whole of Africa, and that's how we got started.
Fantastic. So now you become a sort of a Pan-African content network.
So not only, yes, we became a Pan-African content, but we now went beyond that. We now build a leased line from Boston all the way to Nairobi. And then now we are now selling bandwidth in Kenya. So you could buy dial-up bandwidth. You would dial in, dump email, and we would dial in the US and dump it on the web. So we were the first commercial internet service provider in Kenya.
And that at that point is predominantly was email more than anything, right? It wasn't browsing yet.
No. It wasn't. That Mosaic was just coming into Mosaic. That's the time when Mosaic then also became
coming to market,
with Mark Andreessen and Netscape guys were just beginning to start publicizing what they were doing.
And I imagine at this point, then you sort of formalize the structure, you incorporate, you start hiring people in the markets. I know I joined, I think, somewhere must have been 1997, I think. Somewhere there.
So that's about 2 years after we became formal.
Yes. And I think that was when, the pace was quite frenetic. I remember like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, all of them opening up quickly.
Yeah.
And that was quite profound because this is all pre-Silicon Savannah time, right?
Yes.
You guys, I don't even know how you guys raised money then, what was that like? Because I know that this sort of segues into your time in the venture capital space, but how did that come about? Because I remember there was a time you had money coming from, I think, Prodigy, you had people like African Lakes. What is that process like in terms of fundraising and growing the business across Africa?
So I think because we're so far ahead, we got a lot of support from the venture capital embryonic stages in the Boston area of people who wanted to kind of participate in it.
Okay.
So even as the internet was growing, we had a few people who thought it could go far. We had already made money in the more traditional technology space who thought this was the next stage.
Okay.
So it wasn't challenging, especially once we raised money from someone who had made $300-400 million already from technology.
Wow.
And he, by basically acquiring us, he made us millionaires at 20s. It wasn't that hard to then grow from that point.
And I think also the fact that it was kind of incubated within an environment that was accommodating or appreciative of technology and its
Yeah.
potential to change culture, to change business. These people already got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we our offices for almost 2-3 years were in Kendall Square in Boston, which is basically where all the big VC and technology businesses in the Boston area come from, including now biotech. All the big biotech firms now
all in that area.
That's that area. So we were right in the center of that at the start. Before it became very clear, my investors said, "Now, you go to the other side. Now we want our money back. We've been investing. Now go get traction in terms of numbers." So now that's when we moved to Nairobi and moved the headquarters from Boston to Nairobi.
Fantastic. I don't know whether the young people can ever appreciate how significant this was, because I remember thinking, I keep telling people like Africa Online was actually back in the day the Safaricom of the market. You guys were the name, and building this startup and growing it across different markets, which in many ways I don't think many have even replicated that today. It is quite impressive. But I'm also keen to maybe talk a little bit about the IPO. And I remember there's a time you decided to do that, and there was that transition with African Lakes.
Exactly.
And I think that's an interesting part of maybe of sort of the key milestones. What was that like, and what did you sort of learn and feel from that experience?
Yeah. So at some stage, our initial investor decided to then buy Prodigy. So he buys Prodigy and then discovers Prodigy, which was at some stage the largest internet service provider in America, was a much bigger animal than he could, and it was moving a lot slower than some of the more nimbler players. So he had to sell to Carlos Slim, I think still the richest guy in Mexico and South America, I think. And Carlos Slim and his family felt that their focus was to be in America, to buy CompUSA, and Africa was not a focus. There was also China was also not a focus. We were also in China by then.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so at that stage, I decided I'm going to do an management buyout, and so I had to raise money to do that. Went to South Africa, tried to get the Telkom South Africa guys to get interested. At that stage, I think it was too bureaucratic. Got a few of the technology companies to look at it, but eventually we got a London listed company, African Lakes Corporation, which was an old style conglomerate from the 1930s, 40s. It was in agriculture, selling Land Rovers, selling importing cotton and stuff like that. They wanted to switch from being an old conglomerate to a technology company, because that would switch their listing and again would switch their multiples, their trading multiples.
Okay.
So they acquired us. And then I don't think they really figured out what to do. But as we kept going along, those days there were places on the internet you would type in your revenue and it will give you a valuation. And they typed in our revenue and it gave them a valuation that was worth more than the rest of their company.
Oh.
And they said, "Oh, we better switch now." So they switched immediately and called themselves an internet company. They listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange as a secondary listing. And it was maybe the beginning of my learning about roadshows. I mean, we did roadshows across Europe, across the US. I mean, you wake up in New York and spend the whole one day in the meetings, one after another.
Institutional investors.
Institutional investors. Get on a plane, Boston, you're doing it. Get on a plane, Chicago, San Francisco.
Grueling stuff, huh?
Yeah. You're doing a roadshow of 2-3 weeks. By the time you're done, you can repeat the same thing over. So by the time, I mean, and we ended up raising quite a bit of money then. By the time you are done with that, you become very comfortable with fundraising and what it means, and the fact that it's like everything else. It's a game of numbers. If you want to raise from one investor, you got to go see 100. And going to see 100 means get your pitch deck in place, get the whole process in place. Know that you're probably going to be landing on the first 10 people you speak to. By the time you're getting to the 20th, you can now recite you've gotten feedback from those 10, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, why they'll invest, why they won't invest. By the time you're getting to the 30th guy, you know exactly what you need to be telling them
and what matters to them.
What matters to them. That's how the whole game. So by the time we're getting to, we're getting later in the process. I think I knew that there are a few things I could bring to the table: fundraising, building businesses, growing them, managing people, coaching people, mentoring people. It became a process I understood. I could grow to and go beyond just being an engineer and an entrepreneur.
And I think it's something so interesting because I remember quite clearly as these transitions were happening, there's almost like a professionalism that started to come in, the way the business was run, the reporting structures. It really started feeling like a corporate in the way it operated. It no longer felt like a startup. And I don't know whether that was also interesting for you because, there's usually that energy at the beginning of a tech startup. It's a little bit random, a little bit raw on the edges. And then over time, it becomes almost organized, structured. Things are done properly. But I think probably going through that IPO process made you have to become more, the governance structures, the way the business operates had to become a bit more structured. Huh?
So that came into play. But also remember, here we were in our late 20s, early 30s, and you're trying to run a fairly big business in 10 countries across Africa that you've built from the ground up, from scratch.
Yes.
So we hired professional guys. Half of the first, second layer of management were all in their 50s. Mostly American white guys.
Okay.
The guy running in Kenya was a 56. Chris Land was a 56-year-old guy. We had somebody in Tanzania. We had somebody in Zimbabwe. And they bring in, they begin to tell you, and some of them had come from, manufacturing factories and others. You begin to learn there's more to process and ops than just going out. You begin to learn sales. You remember Malungu. He comes in from Johnson and Johnson, and then you begin to learn sales. It's a process. It's a science. It's not an art. There's an art to it, but there's a whole process to selling, and you start building it, and it becomes. It begins to give you numbers, through that process. You realize, finance is important, and operations connection to finance is critical, and it's important. And that the whole thing, the whole, client's journey through the organization and how you manage it to give them service is a process that needs to be synchronized. And when you're building a brand new company, there'll be weak areas in it, and you need to be constantly aware where is the weak area today. In this quarter, which area is weak, and you need to tweak it. And as you're tweaking it, you're building. It's almost like swim lanes. You're moving all the swim lanes at the same time, so that you can all of them reach at the end. So that's what happened. That's why the company was able to be sustainable enough, despite being in an extremely difficult space that was eventually attacked by telecoms.
Yes.
And I think at some stage we realized, with telecoms giving away basically internet for free so they could sell telephony, we weren't going to survive at that stage. So we had to very quickly reverse ourselves back. But for someone like me, who had graduated straight from college and gone into this company, more or less, you begin to realize that you also rode a wave. So it didn't necessarily teach me how to make money or how to run a business. You riding the wave of it, and sometimes you forget that you're not as good as you are. It's just the sea was rising and you rose with it. So you are up here, but you're not necessarily up here because you worked all the way up there. You're there because you are at the right time, at the right place when the wave was going up, and the wave took you up with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you learn that, and then you now have to figure out, now what is it I should have learned along the way, given where I am. And I think that's what came more or less after Africa Online.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about that transition. You
Yeah.
were there at some point. I can't remember how or when you moved on. For many of us, it was a very shocking moment, I think, when you moved out of the group. Because I remember at some point there was Africa Online, there was UNet, there was
Yeah.
a number of different businesses. I think there was a Tel something,
Telcorp.
Telcorp. But there was these sort of spin-offs and different things happening. But at some point, as I recall, you moved on, and I think you moved into management services or something of that sort. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that transition.
So at some stage, I thought, if you look at what I had learned over time, I thought the best use of my time would be helping other people build businesses. Help them to put together business plans, help them to build, their management teams, mentor their leaderships, and most importantly, do fundraising. The things that you require to build a business.
Correct.
And so I decided I was going to form a fund. At that stage, nobody really had raised a fund to do what we were trying to do. A Pan-African fund. I mean, you had a few. AIG had funded a few people. CDC had done one or two in Kenya, Acacia.
I remember that one. Yeah.
But I think we're a bit ambitious. So we formed Acacia, three of us, and did a few deals in South Africa. But it was also the wrong time to be fundraising. September 11th happened, Enron collapsed.
Yes.
And with that, we decided, you know what, let's put that on hold. And I decided the best way to do it was to join the World Bank Group's AMSCO and help them to train the next generation of entrepreneurs and management across Africa. And we did that over that period of from around 2004 to 2008. And then I went back to we did a very good job. After that, I went back to the same guys and said, okay, now I want to raise a fund. Actually, they told me, you came to us because you are trying to raise a fund. You are struggling getting the DFIs on board. We've seen what you have done. Now we'll back you. So they then backed me with Norfund being the anchor investor, IFC, Propaco, and we formed Fanisi.
Yes.
And now we started investing at that stage, focus on East Africa as a fund manager.
And I think from there's a lot of interesting investments you made. I think there's the pharmaceutical there was that one. I think there was the schools you invested in. Also, I mean, it just was interesting because I think for me, it was kind of an interesting period when I think I'm back to it is because it felt like you had kind of gone out of technology.
Yeah.
And then now, of course, I think in the last few years, there's been these big developments. Of course, you've been involved in Turnkey, which is the insurtech.
Yes.
You set up Agencify. And of course, what's happening now. So I'd also like to kind of maybe understand the transition from the venture business and investments, and then coming back into technology, coming back into the insurtech space, of which, of course, I think there was a legacy period you had, of course, with the Turnkey from before. But maybe tell us a little bit about that transition and how it sort of builds up to this moment.
Yeah. So I think I learned a lot running a fund. We raised two funds. We invested in schools, invested in technology, invested in agriculture, looked at a lot of healthcare across East Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Kenya mostly.
Okay.
I think for me, the most fun, of course, was schools. We did Hillcrest, we did Kitengela International, we did St. Bakita, a few schools. But I then realized I was competing in a space of which I probably was second rate.
Wow. Okay.
There are people who have spent, their whole life in that space. They understand it. They're good at it. My passion at the end of the day was technology. I am a software engineer. I started companies, made money in that space, invested in Turnkey with Kizito, and managed to sustain a lead in providing software to insurance companies across East Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana. So even as I was doing a lot of these other things, I had kept my involvement in turnkey. And then at the end of when we eventually sold our fund to the current owners, I decided that I now wanted to focus on the space I felt I had a passion for, which was technology. So went back in, figured out how to grow turnkey as a very much a software house doing B2B. But at the same time, we said the space that was suffering the most was independent agents. Independent agents, they're not served by anybody. Insurance is not a very sexy place. Fintech is much more sexier, and it gets a lot of money. Insurance is hard. Insurance has 50 different markets in Africa. It's very regulated and very low penetration. And then the guys who probably do the most work, 40% of business is sold by agents. They don't have any tools. So we say, look, let's build a platform, a marketplace where agents can get everything they require on their mobile phone, and independent and insurance companies can service them. If we do that, we felt it will allow higher penetration for insurance, more users for it. You can sell more of it, but also we can use technology to allow agents to sell insurance they would have otherwise not sold before. So that's what we did with the Agencify. Then in the same time, I started doubling with artificial intelligence and machine learning. I had done one or two things in that space at MIT. And so when it came back now, it's like, okay, I had done some of these things before. It was pretty natural to catch up with it.
And was then catalyzed by the ChatGPT moment?
Yes. So ChatGPT then comes up last year, and I was like, now I can see. I mean, you get on ChatGPT and you do a few things, and it reminds you of how the internet, when you saw what Netscape could do, Mosaic could do, and you could do links and HTML and HTTP and all of that. It's like, you can see where this is, and I've been lucky enough, I can see where technology is going and what it can do. And so ChatGPT immediately made it very clear that this technology that had been extremely expensive and which you had to have billions and millions of dollars to even be able to play in would basically democratize knowledge, would democratize the ability to do very simple work at a very cheap price. And now is the first time that I felt that we in the developing world will probably be on the same footing as the guys in Silicon Valley. So I jumped in, with everything I had, and we are not looking back.
And I think it's quite profound because, talking about maybe 30 plus years here, right? In terms of where you've been and what you've done. But more importantly, I think there's some very strong parallels between that internet aha moment and the AI. And I also feel it as well, because as somebody who's also been running a business in the internet space now for almost 22 years, you kind of see it and you're like, oh my God, is this happening again?
Yeah.
I cannot miss this train. I need to figure this out. And I'm really so impressed that, you're somebody who just immediately turned your guns onto it. I think we were talking earlier, you've even gone and done courses on AI and ML. But more importantly, you've seen it for what it is.
Yeah.
And the potential it brings to the insurance space specifically. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the Caava VantagePoint. And I think as a business, how it is specifically addressing the AI and insurance convergence. And more importantly, what do you see happening there within maybe a Pan-African context and maybe even a global context?
Yeah. So as I indicated earlier, insurance is probably the insurance is data. Everything around insurance is all data. But unfortunately, also insurance is the one is a one category that has in Africa and even in the US and whatever in Europe that has probably used technology the least. But it's also the one space where you can run an insurance company from end to end using completely technology without a single human being involved, maybe other than the CEO
wow.
and the owners. So when the technology, the models, the modeling and the models that came out clearly last year with ChatGPT. We said for the first time now, you can very quickly, if you understand your customers, very quickly understand what their needs are, understand what their risks are, financial risks are, whether it's health risks. You can do the risk assessment very clearly at a very much a personalized level, therefore be able to give them the premium they require through your whole risk assessment models. All of it because you can personalize the people you are accessing, on your customer service modules or your customer service interface.
Okay.
Then when they have a need, you can service it also, using technology. And you can then, if you have to get reinsurance, you can connect to reinsurers or providers of capital. Again, without too much human intervention, you can automate the whole process.
The APIs and all.
Exactly. So we said for the first time, and also with the way the world has moved with cloud and mobile, different people can build different modules, whether it's healthcare modules that look at your eye and they can tell you, whether you're healthy or not, but then they're connected directly to the insurance company, whether it's telematics, whether it's Fitbits, all of that. We have all that data. And if someone allows you to access it, I can very quickly be able to proactively tell you, if you don't do X, Y, and Z today, you'll be sick tomorrow. And if you don't do that, your premium will go up. Okay. And we can very quickly be able to even tell you that you're probably going to get sick from a heart attack,
based
because
on this data. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the benefit we now have in Africa, it's just similar to what M-Pesa did for us, is that we don't have very huge regulatory systems like in America. Technology for us will bring the cost of providing healthcare, the cost of providing insurance and selling the agricultural products for insurance through, for farmers and others at a quicker, cheaper than we could have done before. So insurance technology and AI will very quickly be able to bring insurance penetration a lot higher, more effectively in Africa over the next 5 to 10 years than we've seen before. And we can do it also ethically and at the same time, while respecting people's privacy and respecting, making sure that there are no biases, no tribalism, all that stuff. Now, we can make sure that that's respected. We're not biased against women or, people who are disabled or anything like that.
Okay, so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that convergence with technology and insurance and what it means going forward.
Yeah. So I think last year we felt that we could help bring AI ML into the region. We spent a bit of time at Caava VantagePoint looking at what is the cost of doing this, and we felt for the first time we can bring AI ML at an affordable price into this market, train engineers, young people, get them up to speed quickly, and begin to very quickly enable Kenyans and beyond Kenya to begin to take advantage of this technology as quickly as we need to, because it's going to move really, really fast.
Correct.
So the first thing was to educate the CEOs in the insurance space, and we did that last year in September.
Okay.
Then in February, we went the next layer down beyond just the CEOs, the C-suite. Again, strategic level, where what is artificial intelligence? What does it do? How do you determine your readiness? How do you, once you've determined what your readiness for artificial intelligence is and what are the things you need to do in your organization to be ready, how do you start planning it out? And these are things which you'll be shocked. You think they're easy, they're simple. Actually, it's not. So just, if you're at this level of readiness, these are the 2-3 things you can do in the next 1 month, the next 5 months, the next 6 months, the next 12 months. This is where you should start. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can take this course on Coursera. You can do this here. You can put together a committee. You can motivate your board. You can motivate senior people. That was very successful. Again, oversold. It was sold out as you noticed. Then we said, okay, now we will have another one in May. This time we're going to focus on what artificial intelligence can do in product innovation and operational efficiencies in the insurance space. So how do you utilize artificial intelligence to make your customers happier, to make your customers get what they want, when they want it, how they want it? But also, how do you use artificial intelligence to make your operations efficient in terms of claims management, in terms of financial management, risk assessment, the things that are required? And then we went a step further and we said, a lot of people don't realize that with ChatGPT, even in its current incarnation, there's just so much you can do with it. So we will have a competition, an Aki AI Innovation Challenge, where we will give you a data set, a typical insurance data set with about 30 columns and about 1,000 data points. And we want you to get certain insights out of it that an insurance company would be able to use in determining risk and determining claims, ratios and technology. So we decided to do that, and it's picked up well. But the idea really was to say, you don't have to spend more than $20 a month to already be able to do quite a lot with ChatGPT, which is available, and it's getting cheaper because now we have 3 LLMs in the market, and there are going to be more with Meta coming out with one, and Google and Oracle and Microsoft OpenAI.
Correct.
So we said, let's first of all democratize that. Then second, we said, let's actually show that we can build a Gen AI assistant actually doing real work. Okay, and so we went out and we built a renewal Gen AI assistant. It calls you, it reads to you what your statement is, it renews your insurance policy for you, it sends a text to you, sends you an OTP, you talk to it. It even,
just like a real person.
You can even joke with it. You can tell it, let's go for lunch. And they tell you, actually, I am not a real human being. I can't eat lunch, but you can send me some money and I might, use it, stuff like that. But we've reached that point, and it doesn't require us to go to Silicon Valley to do it. We can do all of that here in Nairobi. And I can predict that in the next 4 to 5 years, everybody will be doing it because it's not that complicated to do it. The point, though, is how much more can we continue having AI improve our livelihood and improve the livelihoods of Kenya? So we've started off with insurance because that's the space we know.
Yeah.
But we think we can very quickly outgrow insurance with CVPI, because CVPI is all about AI ML. Turnkey is about insurance and insurance for insurance companies, and Agencify is all about agents. So that's how everything comes together. But CVPI can actually grow beyond that, and it's our intention to very much make AI ML accessible to anyone who wants to access it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So going forward, I'm just curious in terms of, given this trajectory you're on with the AI ML insurance and maybe the broader business issues or business operational issues that it can help solve or enhance within Kenya and of course the Pan-African space, what are your thoughts around the next 2 to 5 years? Where do you see all this going?
Yeah. So I think that the one thing I do is I respect Kenyans. They are sharp, they're entrepreneurial, they are hustlers. I can see they're already at the right level of, if I would say, as a country, what is our readiness for AI ML? I think we had a very good AI ML readiness as a country. We have the right engineering skill set, good training, very comfy with mobile technology. We're getting more cloud data centers being built by Microsoft and others locally.
Correct.
We have, the Microsoft Africa Development Center, the Google, the Apple. I mean, everyone has
Even
one.
Amazon is here now.
Amazon. So that has already built enough of that. So a lot of the remote work being done in America is done here, including training the AI models in America. A lot of that training is being done in Kenya. So over the next, the thing about AI, ML, it's a local game. It's not about sitting in Silicon Valley. AI and the use of it and the training of it is going to be local. So AI is going to be about, being used in healthcare at the local space. It has to be trained locally. It has to be used locally. You may build it in Silicon Valley, but the guys who are going to really make it work are going to have to be local. So training AI for healthcare, training AI for banking, training AI for insurance, those are all local jobs. Kenyans will take that out very quickly, and then I can foresee that within a very short time, they'll start going outside, to start. So it could become an export of ours within a very short period of time, just because we're already that far ahead. And if we continue learning and running with it, we'll be able to maintain it. So if you look at those who understood where internet was going to go, and they kept following, the as they say, following the gold sim, all the way down. You can see how quickly people like Mark Zuckerberg were able to build something on it. It took Mark Zuckerberg how long to become a millionaire? 20 years, maybe 15. What do you think? It'll probably take a lot shorter with AI, ML to reach those levels. We're going to start seeing some, extreme, movements in terms of capabilities.
Yeah.
And of course, with that brings wealth. And if Kenyans do it well, I think they'll be able to take advantage of that.
No, I think absolutely. And in fact, I'm actually quite shocked because as I've been kind of delving into AI as almost like a passion area and also now practically meeting people doing things on the ground, I'm shocked at how many chatbots and LLMs are being deployed. People are building language ones. People are building for health use cases.
Yes.
And you start to realize there's already a massive amount of activity on the ground, which can only suggest that in a short period of time there'll be a level of competence and capability on the ground that suggests that Kenya could become a center of excellence for AI, use cases and platforms and so forth.
Yeah.
And maybe I think maybe, with all of this, I think I'd maybe like to ask you one last question, which would be, given your background in technology, the convergence in business areas like insurance and now AI, are there any words of wisdom or nuggets that you want to share from this long career? And just sort of things that you think maybe possibly the future AI entrepreneurs perhaps, or maybe people in the technology space today in what we now call Silicon Savannah. Are there any things that you might want to leave with them from this session? And I think maybe the last thing beyond that, I think, is maybe you can talk to us a little bit specifically about next week's conference or seminar, so that those who might want to attend, what they can hope to expect and possibly how they can be a part of that event.
Yeah. So I think for me, I think the Jensen Huang
NVIDIA
said, I think there was something about resilience.
Correct. Yeah.
That going to some of the top schools doesn't build resilience. Resilience comes from, never having certainty or being, just kind of being able to try it out and try it. And I think that the success for the young people today, I would say success will come out of being very resilient and building resilience in yourself, because that's what is required in an entrepreneur. You need to be, you need to know that if building businesses was easy, all of us would have businesses and we would do it quickly. It takes time. It took time for a whole ecosystem to build in America that enables entrepreneurs to go through the ranks and to grow and raise money at the right level and go to the next stage. It'll take a while. However, I think that those who are clear about where they want to go, they are patient about it, they are committed to it. It's not about the money, it's about what they are doing, it's about the bigger goal, the bigger objective that they're focused on.
Almost a purpose, yeah?
Yes, what's the purpose? What's the why? If you're very clear on what is the why, the other things tend to fall in place. And be consistent about it. Be self-aware. Look after yourself, and be very clear that and I think that's probably some of the younger us should have been told about. I think a lot of us were fairly arrogant about getting to where we wanted to go without being self-aware. I think that self-awareness becomes very important to know, how to work with other people, how to treat investors, how to treat your customers, and continue building an ecosystem of which you are at the center of it, but you're not, making yourself the center of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's what I would say I have learned. In terms of next week, I would encourage anyone out there who wants to learn about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and learning from the best to come for our conference. We've got speakers from Google, Microsoft, Huawei, giving us a whole different aspect of AI from the Chinese side of things. We've got Britam, Jubilee, coming to tell us what they're doing, ICEA. I would say if you really want to learn what the future will look like, not just as an insurance professional, but someone who wants to learn generally the application of AI and ML in a sector, and in this case, starting with insurance, this is the right place for you to come and start, and then you can grow beyond that. And we have put on a very good, we've curated a very good program for anyone who wants to learn about how to use artificial intelligence to actually do something with it in real life. Yeah.
Well, I see. Thank you so much. I'll make a point that when we do publish this podcast, we'll have a link for those who want to register. And I hope even afterwards, maybe the videos will be made available from the same. But thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Karibu
Thanks,
sana,
Moses.
and sharing your journey and where you are today. And we really do appreciate this moment.
Keep doing this. We need more people like you, very committed to spreading the word, getting the story out, and consistent. What you're doing is not easy, and I know that. It may look like for a lot of people out there as if you're just having fun. Organizing this, programming it, and getting it out consistently as you do, it's commitment. And the same way any entrepreneur makes it, I know you're going places. You've chosen a journey.
Yeah.
And wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much, AC.
And hopefully we'll be here another 10 years.
We'll see where we are in 10 years.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today. As you've heard it all from Ayisi, one of the pioneers of the internet and technology space in Kenya and Africa. He's done it all, and he's doing it once again with AI. And I think that should be almost a call to action to some of us old gray hairs, that you don't have to stop when you're in your 50s. You can still push on and still be an innovator. And more importantly, Africa needs us. Let's use our experiences, our exposure to make sure that, we can use the latest technologies and create innovations that allow the continent to progress above and beyond where we are today. We'll catch you in the next one.